swimmers, her and her friends. So that's good stuff. But anyway, hey, we're going to get into this. Tonight's topic is going to be, it's titled How the Control Panel Works. And we could talk on and on and on and on. And I think for most of us, and I realized after this, after we put this together, I think most of us think of how the self-hosted panel works, but I'm not sure. So the discussion that we're going to have tonight, I made the assumption that most people in this meeting tonight are going to be interested in understanding how the self-hosted control panel works. There are a little bit of differences between the Buzztouch.com panel and the self-hosted panels, but we'll try to cross a little bit of that stuff. And so the topics that we're going to spend the next 90 minutes or so talking about mostly relate to the self-hosted, but I think we'll draw some relationships between the two, and most of us will understand that. And then we'll talk about the self-hosted package, which I've got right here open up on my computer. And we'll talk about why there are so many files in it, right? There's quite a bit of files inside of this package. And so, we'll talk about all of those. What is PHP? You see all these file extensions, .php. A lot of people don't even know what PHP is. So we'll talk about what that does and what role it plays in helping our control panel work. We'll talk about how this package is organized, this package being the self-hosted package. How we can extend the API, how you guys might want to extend the API in your self-hosted panels if you're running a self-hosted panel. How we might create custom themes, and we can explore, really how easy that is. It's not a big deal. And we'll ask for some questions at the end. I am going to tonight talk about, try to remember, because we're going to go 90 minutes, remember to stop along the way and take some questions as we go. I know I'm not real good at that. I tend to kind of get going real fast, but the first thing I'm going to do is, and Warren, you may remind me to try to take some questions or something. I'm just kind of a madman when I get cruising on these things.
Okay,
so the first thing
I'll jump in.
Yeah, just jump in and holler at me. Or if I had a little bell on my desk, you could ring the little bell. So anyway, so I'm in a self-hosted control panel right now, and a lot of us are familiar with how this looks and how this works. But I'm also going to open up my account at Buzztouch.com so that we can kind of just quickly compare the differences. And so I'm going to move this tab in my browser to a separate window so I can see these side by side. And what I'll do is we'll just compare this window here to this window here. So as soon as I log in, I'm logged in as Joe on a self-hosted panel. The first thing you'll notice is it's a little bit different than my Buzztouch.com control panel. And most of those differences are related to some of the features and some of the work that we've done on the Buzztouch.com site to help us all kind of stay engaged as a community. And all these options on the left, you just don't have those in the self-hosted control panel. So we don't need to worry too much about that. But when you go to your applications list, you'll see, I've got a bunch of applications in my debug one. I use it all the time for a lot of these webinars and stuff. That's really where the similarities between, say, this application in the self-hosted panel, which I've called My First App, and the same screen in essence, the landing page for an applications control panel on the Buzztouch.com site. And so really all of this stuff on the left is going to relate to all of this stuff on the left here. So I'm going to get out of the Buzztouch.com panel, and we're going to work in the self-hosted panel. And if you guys have questions about the difference between the two as we go, then raise your hand, or I don't know, send up a smoke signal or something. I'm sure somebody will see it. I'll try to pay attention to the list here. So off we go. So really, how does this work? Fundamentally, people like me who are comfortable with PHP and databases and websites and all that stuff, we understand the relationship between our application's configuration file, our application's JSON data that so many of us are used to seeing. We understand the relationship between that information and our application's information. And we can see that relationship visually when we use the configuration data screen in our control panels. We can just see it. And so for most people, though, they look at this and they just see a bunch of, some people call it code. I don't want to look at the code. Well, I don't consider this code. I consider this data, but that's a different kind of discussion to have. But the point is that configuration data, that link right there that shows us this configuration data, is really the only connection between our application. In fact, let me run this application in the simulator so we can kind of get something going. I don't remember where we left off in yesterday's webinar. Let's bring something up on the screen. But the connection between the phone and the control panel is sometimes really the wrong way to look at it. And I say that because in my mind, in a programmer's mind, we think, what is the connection between the phone and this data file? Because remember, this data file could live anywhere. This file could be on Dropbox, this file could be on your own website. We just happen to use the control panel to provide to the device this JSON information. So really, that is the connection, the JSON data to the phone. And so we all know that the phone is going to ask for the data using the data URL inside our compiled application. So like here it is in Xcode, and this is the URL for data URL. See, I introduced that typo yesterday, but the data URL and the URL right here tells the phone, tells the device where to find this information. So an easy way to test that, and I do this all the time, is I'm going to copy this URL. I'm going to go to another browser window. I'm going to paste it in there, and I'm going to show, I'm just going to show you that this URL produces the exact same file, this data right here, as this screen right here. And so the reason that that's important is, once again, understanding that this information is just a display for you to see what that current data is. And what I mean by that is, let's make a change here. You see where we have background color 43, 43, 43 in our theme? If I go to the theme, and I'm working with my default theme, and I change the background color, let's say I set it to all black, and I save this. If I go back to our configuration data, you'll see that that theme has changed. So all we did was we changed the value in this file by using the control panel. And of course, if I refresh the URL, which is right here, then I'm also going to see that change right there. So that's the relationship between the device and the control panel. And I say that's the relationship. All it knows is how to find this stuff. Now, obviously, screen by screen, in each of our screens here, we've got a screen there, we've got another screen here. Some of these screens have data URLs of their own, something like this, right? We could have a data URL here for this particular screen, and it would then look for that JSON data for that one screen at that URL. So let's stop for a minute and back up and look at our agenda and talk about what the heck is the self-hosted package. Because I think all of that stuff, definitely the people in this webinar looking at the attendee list, most of us understand that stuff so far. So what is this? So fundamentally, what the self-hosted package is just a bunch of files. So here are those files, and this is what you download when you go to the Buzztouch.com control panel and download the self-hosted package. This is everything that you get. So technically speaking, the self-hosted package is a collection of files that all together make up a piece of software that we call Buzztouch. And so that software, of course, needs to run on a web server. And the reason it runs on a web server is because we use web addresses and browsers to access the software. So fundamentally, what the self-hosted package is a collection of files. Pretty simple. So why are there so many of them? Why are there so many files? If you explore this package, I would say that there aren't very many. Now, that might sound crazy to you, but if you've ever seen a large web application before, and you've ever worked in the website world, you would see that some files have, or some web applications have thousands and thousands and thousands of files. This application really doesn't have that many. Now we do include the CK editor, which is something that we didn't write. This is that that text editor, that online text editor that we use when we're making custom HTML screens mostly. It itself does have quite a few files on its own, but and we include that folder in here. And actually, just a little side note as a tip, if you guys are uploading a new version of the self-hosted panel or doing an update, you can skip this folder here and save yourself a bunch of time. And there's no reason to rewrite it every time it's the same thing. But anyway, so the reason that there are so many files is these are all the files that are necessary to make this thing work. And again, not very many of them in my mind, but we get emails oftentimes to say, why is there so many files? So that's kind of the answer to that. There's a lot because they're all necessary, and in my opinion, there aren't very many. So we'll move on. So what is PHP? So PHP, a lot of people get really, really stuck with this. When we go to a web browser and we type in google.com, you notice we do not have a file extension or a file at the end of this address like index.html or mywebpage.html. We don't have a file extension. We just have a domain name. But can we guess to see what the name of this file is? Nope, it's not index. It's not index.html. It's not index.php. Google is serving this document here. This is a document from a directory on their website called the root directory. And we know that because there's no directories like this. And it might be a PHP file. It might be a Java file. It might be all different kinds of things. But what it's producing is HTML. And so if I view the source of this web page, you'll see that this is all HTML, lots of it. And whatever file produced it, Google's deciding which file produced that HTML. Now we know that, you see a little skeleton here on our Halloween image? We know that this Google web page changes a lot. In fact, David Book up here, yours probably doesn't say David, yours says something else. Well, that means that your web page is different than my web page. So they must be using some technology in the back to produce a custom web page for me. So that's where this PHP thing comes in. So what PHP is, in fact, let's Google what is PHP. What is PHP? What PHP is it's software, and it says right here, it's a recursive acronym for Hypertext Preprocessor. That's a technical way to say it's software running on the web server. So in our world, in our self-hosted package, in our blogs and our websites and all of the things that we do, and we're not Google, we use PHP to dynamically generate HTML or data or text. And let's go back to our URL for our data, and I'll show you what I mean. This file could not have been created in advance, right? Because I showed you that we just changed a value in it and it automatically updated. So if I go back and I change another value, let's go back to our theme, and I'll show you what I mean. Let's change this to, I don't know, where were we, 45, 45, 45, I have no idea what color that is. This file right here, as soon as I hit refresh, it's going to change. And the reason it's going to change is because we are using PHP, I'm going to go to the end of the address here, to show you this page. It's called index.php. It wasn't there a second ago because it's the default page. This page, the PHP file, its job is to produce this output. And we can customize the output because our PHP file has access to things like the file system and the database and all that kind of stuff. And we can make dynamic content. We can create dynamic content on the go anytime we want because we're using this software called PHP. So if this was an HTML page, it could produce the same thing, but it wouldn't be able to change because we can't program in HTML. You'll hear people say sometimes, I'm an HTML programmer. And for programmers, we kind of giggle and say, you don't program HTML. HTML is a markup language. It doesn't understand things like addition and subtraction and file systems and it's not a programming language, it's just a markup language, but PHP absolutely does understand things like math and logic, and we can say if, then, else, and all these different things. So PHP is the programming language that we use to create dynamic output to control and power our apps. So that's what PHP is. How the package is organized. So this is pretty easy to understand. Just like any project, any technical project that you might work on, it's good to stay organized using different directories and different folders. And so really the way we've done this is we've separated this out into a couple of different important sections. The BTV15 folder holds all of the application-specific files. So let me give you an example of that. If I go to this control panel here, and I go to Manage Themes, for example, we are Buzztouch Server, and then we are inside the BTV15 folder, which is right here, and then we are inside another folder called BT App, which is right here, and we're looking at a file called btthemes.php, which is right here. So this is organized into a logical collection of directories that we navigate around. So every time you're managing an app, you'll be in most of these screens here. And so if I go to global, or if I go to tabs, or if I go to core properties, or if I go to my file manager, you'll notice that we're always inside the Buzztouch 15 BT app directory. Another side note, and I'm going to stop for some questions. This is confusing. We did a kind of an amateur job of originally naming these folders when we first started releasing the self-hosted version, and in that we should not have named this BTV15. Really, originally what it was meant to be was, back then it was Buzztouch version 1.5. Well, now we all know that that doesn't even exist anymore, so it's a little bit misleading. What this should be is something like that, just Buzztouch Server, then Buzztouch App. And so we'll have to fix that with the next release, and we're a little bit intimidated by fixing it now because so many people don't understand how it's organized. So I'm going to stop for some questions, and then we'll move on. At that point, we stopped at how is the package organized. Looks like I see a couple hands up. Susan, maybe?
Susan has her hand up, yes. Go ahead, Susan.
Susan's always wonderful for an insightful question.
Oh, well, you explained this to me when you were here, but I think it's a really good question, is when you go and compare the files that are on your own local drive compared to what's on your server, there's quite a bit of a difference between the files, so there's not really a one-to-one relationship. And then you explained that before, but I thought it was a really good question, so I thought I'd ask it again.
So what is the question?
Oh, the question is, why are there different files on your server than what you have on your local site?
Ah, that's a great question. Okay, so here's the explanation. And my first reaction is, well, I don't know, it's your server. On the other hand, that makes perfect sense. So some of the files that Susan's seeing and referring to don't exist in this download. And that's because a lot of the files aren't created yet. For example, if I go to this control panel here, and I do something like files and media, and I upload a new picture to my file manager. Where are those files? They're not in the download because they didn't exist when I downloaded the software. I haven't even used it yet in this case, but they must exist somewhere on the server. And if I open this up and I look at the URL to this picture, by the way, that's 10 years ago, Santa Claus, my daughter.
Oh, yeah.
If I look at this picture, you can see here that this file exists, and we can just follow the path, right? So this file exists at Buzztouch Server, Files. So let's go to Buzztouch Server, Files. Then it goes to Applications, Applications, and then it goes to the Application ID, which is right here, and then it goes to Images. I go, wait a minute, there's no images in there, and then it goes to the file name 021_22.jpg. These files are created dynamically. So this directory right here didn't exist when you installed the software. It was created when you created an app. So every time you create an app, you're going to get in the applications folder on your web server a new folder that's going to look like this. So this one here, actually, I copied it when I just copied this from the server I'm running this on, so I should delete this. And this would be a more accurate representation of what it'll look like when you download it. There won't be anything here. So when you look at your remote server, you'll see folders inside the application. Excuse me. You'll see folders inside the applications. You'll see folders inside the plugins, right? These don't come with the download, but I've added them all. So these, and that's why when you read the documentation, it says, hey, don't overwrite anything in the files directory, because that's not going to get overwritten when you do an upload, or when you, excuse me, when you do an update. When you update the package, maybe we come out with a new version of self-hosted server, say tomorrow, you don't want to overwrite all your application data, all your plugins, and all that kind of stuff. And so, great question. So the answer is that they're different because some of the files on your web server are created dynamically as you use it.
And it's just
So
the applications and it's the plugins that are going to reside.
There's going to be a couple different things. The applications, the plugins, you might have some temporary data that's created when you do a lot of different things. In fact, well, I'm not connected to the web server, but you can do some, there'll be some temporary files in here. And when you go to your admin panel, and this isn't even something at all, this has nothing to do with the Buzztouch.com site, because of course we manage all that. But when you go to your admin panel and you go to like server settings, for example, you know, or our server maintenance, I think, there you go. You can look at all the temporary files. See, there's 23 of them on the server right now, and 5 directories that are just temporary, that are created as a part of how the software works, and it's a good idea to empty those every now and then. And so these temporary files are created as you manipulate around, and really one way to look at that is every time you upload something, it's got to go somewhere. So we put it in a temporary folder, then we might crop it, or we might change it, or we might move it, or we might give it a new file name or something. And now you have that lingering file in the temp folder, which, you know, would have been one strategy would have been to delete it right away. But we decided a long time ago that we're going to kind of let that happen manually, because people who run the self-hosted package generally want to see everything that's happening. So we don't delete things without them kind of knowing, because after all, it's their machine. But great question. Any other questions along those lines, or along any other lines so far where we are? Nope. Okay. So jump in if you have one. We're going to keep moving on, because we're going to get to the kind of some nuts and bolts. So how this thing is organized, we just talked about. It's just a bunch of folders and a bunch of files. The reason PHP runs when we request these files is because they have a PHP extension, right? So our web server knows that when I ask for this file in my browser through a URL, then it's going to execute PHP and do everything the PHP script or program was told to do based on how it's written and what its job is. So extending the API. Let's talk about this for a little bit, because this is really fun, and we get all kinds of cool stuff out of this, or cool questions out of this. Let's go back to an application list, and let's go to our, you know, the only application in this control panel. Let's go back to the configuration data, and actually, you know what? Let's go back to the core properties and look at the data URL. This is the same URL that I could have seen right in that config data. I'm jumping around. It's the same URLs we have right here. So I'm going to paste it in the browser. Another window, paste. We're going to go back right where we were. And you'll notice that we are in the API folder right here. We are in the app subdirectory, so API, app. And then we are at index.php. And for non-web programmers, the reason I know that is because there's no file name here, but it's the same thing as typing this. And I have our backend set up to serve index.php as the default file. So every time you see a / with no file name, you're going to be getting index.php. And so this is the file right here that is producing this output. So I'm going to open up that file on the web server. We are in, and I'm going to close my Macintosh Finder window, and I'm just going to use my FTP editor, which is, I use Dreamweaver for my FTP editor. So we're going to go to Buzztouch Server, we're going to go to API, we're going to go to App, and then we're going to go to Index, and I'm going to open this up. So this is the exact file that controls the output that we're seeing right here, which is the exact same data that we would get if we hit the, I don't have a refresh button on this app, but if we hit the refresh button on this app, we'd be hitting this URL and saying, hey, get me the data. So this is the file that produces that. So I can prove that to myself by writing just a fun little, and I'm writing PHP now. I'm going to say, hey PHP, echo, my name is David, and then exit. In other words, end. So I'm going to upload this file to the web server. I just typed a simple little line here. I'm modifying this file, and then I'm telling PHP to stop. And I'm doing this as a demonstration to show you that, to kind of prove to us that this URL and this index page is quote unquote the one we're working on. And so my FTP client seems to be super slow right now. I wonder if GoToMeeting's hogging all of our bandwidth. I bet it is. Let me try to get connected here. Hang on. Let's get connected. I'm not connected to this machine. This is kind of a testing server that I use all the time. So let's close this. Let's try to get connected again. Takes it a second sometimes. I probably should have connected before we started. There we go. Okay, so I'm working on the index file. I'm going to upload it, and I'm going to hit refresh, and what we're going to see is, hi, my name is David, and then it's going to stop. It's not going to give us anything else, just like that. So I've basically just proved to myself that the file we're working on is this file. So I do testing like this all the time. So I'm going to get rid of this, and we'll step through what happens here. So we declare a little variable called the client variables. It's array, another array that we call errors. We require a file here. We tell PHP, hey, include this file in your script. So it's validate request. And this file validates that our API key over here is good and our application exists and all those kinds of things. It's like I might have another question. My little GoToWebinars ball is jumping up and down. Susan says, hey, how do I use Dreamweaver to edit files? How do I use Dreamweaver to edit files? That's its purpose, right? I just open them up and edit them. Not sure what you mean. Oh, I know what you mean. You're probably used to using Dreamweaver in what they call design view or split view or whatever. I never use design view. I'm just a code guy. So I just open up a file and hit code. Hopefully that'll answer your question. I just type the code, and then I'm hitting Shift-Command-U to upload it, and I'm good. So hopefully that answers Susan's questions about how I use Dreamweaver to edit files. But anyway, so we've got a couple variables here, and then we say, hey, is this API request right here, is it valid? And we'll use this little class here that's called inc_validate request, which is right here. We're including this file. I'm not going to talk about that at this moment. And then there's some notes to self. You know, what does this file do? And then we say, hey, if this errors array up here doesn't have anything in it, and the command key in this client vars array equals get app data, then do all of this. So we process all of this logic, and we output at the end of this, we echo the result, which is, let's upload this, which is something like this. So there's our result. So the command right here, get app data, that's telling our API, remember we're in index, we're in API app index, we're saying if the command equals get app data, which it does, capitalized, then do all this. We could say something like this. Let's extend this a little bit, which talks about right here, extending the API, right? Maybe we wanted to add to our API, and instead of having a routine called report to cloud and a routine called get app data or whatever, maybe we had another routine called, let's copy this. Maybe we had another routine called print variables or print locations for map. Print locations for a map. just as an example. So print map spots or something along those lines. So everything in between these curly braces will run if our command right here equals print map spots. So let's do this. Let's change this to print map spots. We're still passing in the application's ID. We're still passing in our API key. We're going to validate those up here. Remember, we don't want to let anybody hit our server with these kinds of requests. And let's echo now. Here we are! Exclamation point. So we just made a new little routine in our API called print map spots. And when we refresh this page, we get, uh-oh, it's mad at me. It's mad. Oh, you know what? It's probably not going to let me do that. Let me go to validate request. I'm just winging it here. It's probably, let me find it. See what the little validator says. Invalid API request, no command found. My little print map spots is not allowed. I just created a new command called print map spots, and it's telling me this script here, the validate request, is telling me, hey David, that isn't allowed. You need to tell us explicitly that you're going to be having a command called get map request. So we'll go up here and we'll say, just for fun, let's not validate this request for a minute, just to prove to ourselves that this is working. And that's not going to work. I got a little error. Let me go back here and say command API request. I'm just going to search this file for that error. Says it's not found. What the heck? Can't remember my own code. It's been a while since I looked in this. Invalid request method, invalid API, maybe in our index, inc validate request. I've probably got an array of valid request types, so I'm looking for that here. Let me say command invalid API. You know, maybe this is not the best time to try to customize this, but what I was going to show you is you could add. Oh, here we go. No command found. We go back to get app data. See how this runs? That's because this command right here, get app data, is an allowed request. So I'm trying to add a custom one, and I can't remember here where I put these. I should have done a little homework. Maybe I'm in the wrong file. App stats. Oh no, I'm in validate request is the only thing here. So where am I asking for? Where am I saying these are allowed and these aren't allowed? Let's see, API key, API secret. There's the command, errors, request method. That's for the user, the device, if this is coming from the device. Invalid credentials. Invalid credentials, that's not true. API key. Let's do this. Let's make sure we're working with the right file. Going to change this, make sure I'm looking at the right script. Sometimes you trick yourself. It's been a while since I looked at this. Okay, so this is the routine that we're in, so that's good. Somewhere in here I'm saying it's got to be get app data, or we had another one down here, report to cloud. Where's our report to cloud method? Here it is. So if I put report to cloud in here in the command, it's going to let us do that. Let's test that and make sure. So that's a valid command. Get app data is a valid command. Yeah, so that's the results of the get the report to cloud command. But we want to run our own little custom command, and I can't seem to find in my validate routine here, script file name, API key. So we're saying if the value of command isn't set, then there's an error. We have a command in here, and we're calling it, what did we call it? Get map list? I'm going to spend all this time doing something I didn't plan on doing. Oh well. Print map spots, that's what we're calling it. So if I say print map spots, it's telling me invalid. Oh, duh, I didn't exit. That's funny. So if I exit, oh, here we go, I lost my connection again. So what ended up happening is we ran this, and then we came all the way down here. The routine, the logic didn't execute, and we tried to execute all that kind of stuff too. We got to this point, and we should have exited. You see here, we were printing this result right there. So we needed to exit, and we weren't exiting. In other words, hey, PHP, you're done. So let me upload this again. It's like it's trying right now. It lost its connection again. Darn thing. My FTP client's just hosing me. Let me cancel. Let me reconnect. It's pretty funny too, because I found that as good as an FTP client as Dreamweaver is, it's got a lot of little weird things like it times out and things like that. Okay, we're back on track. So here we are, it's printed right here because we added a new command called print map spots. And our custom little command that our API might put out, maybe we call it provide stat data or something like that, right? You might want to give API credentials to some third party and allow him to log into your API and give him provide stat data and give him or give her access to one little routine. So you could give them a URL and you could tell them, hey, hit this URL and we will output information for our apps, and maybe it's an advertiser or maybe it's something like that. What the heck, I just ran into the same thing. Provide stat data. I keep making these typos. So provide stat data or something like that. And so this one custom API routine could be used by somebody who's maybe doing some marketing or something for you that, you know, maybe you output, I don't know, you know, go to database, get list of apps, output statistics about usage. And you could print all that stuff here and then exit the program. And when he hit that URL, he would get the information you wanted to show him. And again, I got a little delayed. It's kind of disappointing that I ran into that error that I wasn't expecting. But the point is we were talking about how to extend the API. And there's a million ways you can do it. I can't predict those ways. I'm just dreaming these up as we're talking. But what you're going to do is you're going to add routines to the API index.php page, and then you're just going to name them a command, and you're going to give that command to somebody else. And you could say things like, you could prevent people from accessing your server too by doing all kinds of other stuff. And that's the reason in your control panel you have, in your admin, you have, let me find it, to manage data access. This is why you have control panel users that might not log into your control panel. You can add an ID and give them a password, and you can set an expiration date, and then you can do things like customize your API to allow other people to use it for a certain amount of time. There's all kinds of different ways that I can imagine extending this. And we've used this in custom jobs where it's quite complex what they might want it to do. You might have a classroom full of students using your custom control panel, and half of them aren't you know, you don't want half of them using certain apps, but other ones are admins and all kinds of weird, interesting situations. And so you write a couple quick scripts in your API, you make new users, and you limit the way that certain people use your program. And so teaching you how to do those things goes beyond that. I'm not here to teach you how PHP works, but I want you to know that there isn't any limit to what you can do because it's open source and because you have all the files. because this package is completely available to you to customize, and you might have to customize. You might have to pay somebody to customize it. That's completely fine. But you can do it. In most cases, when you do it, you're going to be doing it in either the API folder, so that you can control access, or sometimes you'll do it in the files folder. There's a custom script. There's a, I use the custom folder to do certain kinds of feeds that are maybe only for one app. An example of that might be, let's go to our app, and maybe we made a screen called, I don't know, let's add a menu called Dynamic Movie Lists. And it's a menu of things. So we want to find, a menu within, or we could just do menu simple. And in our menu, our dynamic movie list screen, we might want to do, in the data URL here, we might want to put our custom script right here, right? So we could create a custom script just for this app, put in our files custom folder so it doesn't get overwritten when we update the software, and we could point this screen to it. It would be something like Buzztouch server, files, custom, movie list, .php or something like that. So right now, that file doesn't exist because we haven't made it. See, files, custom, movie list, it doesn't exist. So this menu that expects a JSON data feed of menu items, we want to make a list of movies, for example. This script doesn't exist, so you're going to get an error. But if we made that script, we'll make a script called new file movielist.php. Just a blank file. I'll write some PHP here. And as a test, we'll say output list of movies. So we'll echo here, exit, just to prove to ourselves that this is the file that we're pointing to. So this is movielist.php. There's the results of movielist.php. This screen, this menu screen, it's not going to like that data though. Remember, it's going to want JSON data, because JSON is what powers our menus, right? And we know, because we're experienced buzz touchers, that menus require JSON data that look like this, with child items and all that kind of stuff. So our script wouldn't output just words. It would output something like this. So we could say echo, we're starting our child items, right? We could output each of these. Let's see if I can do this fast enough without getting all crazy. Actually, let's just do this. It doesn't even need to be PHP. We'll just output it plain text style, because we don't need to be dynamic. So if we list, if our file just looked like that, and we refreshed it, that would power a menu. Now the items wouldn't be very good, right? We'd probably want to do like, movie row 1, movie row 2, or we'd do something like this. Connect to Yahoo's movie listing API, grab all the movies within a certain distance of my zip code, output the movies in JSON format to power a menu list. So you would do something like this, right? You would start this at the top before your programming logic came in. You would then, let's say there's 10 movies. We could do something like, for x equals 0, x is less than, 50 movies. I'm just doing a simple PHP loop here for those who are not familiar with PHP. For those who are, we're going to echo an item in our list for each movie. I'll see if I can haul some butt through this so it's fast. Got a bunch of syntax errors here that I'll fix in just a sec. So PHP requires us to escape the quotes. So we need to escape the quotes with a /. So I'll add all my // to the quotes. Fun stuff. I wasn't going to do this. I wasn't going to do this live, but it doesn't matter. It's fun. We got time. We're just creating it. This is just a simple example of how we would create a dynamic list of things. I'm obviously not connecting to the Buzztouch or to the Yahoo API. But we'll output all of our items. And then we're going to do 50 of them, right? So we don't need these items anymore. We'll finish the JSON with the little brace there, and this is where we started it. This is where we end it. Let's upload this and see what it looks like. So there's our 50 items. That looks kind of lame, right? So maybe instead of saying this is row 1, maybe we put this as row X. So it's, you know, row 1, row 2, row 3, all the way up to 50. And then maybe our ID is dynamic also. And load screen with item ID, you would probably put the ID of another screen, or you create a dynamic screen to load, like a web page or something like that. Row 10, 12, 13, you can see how this works. But the key is it's related to data, right? We're dynamically creating rows for our menu from a custom script that we wrote right here, and we wrote this in 5 minutes. It hasn't done anything yet, but you get the idea. And we pointed a menu at it in our control panel right here. So this menu would be powered by these items. So that's an example of how you can extend the API, and you can extend, you know, outside of the API, just adding a custom script. Now this script wouldn't be secure, right? Anybody could get to this. Sometimes that matters, sometimes that doesn't. So you might have to build in some logic to secure it and things like that. But it can be tremendously useful. So I'll get rid of movie list. I'll get rid of index. I'll close this. And let's go back again for some questions. We're about 6:50, so we got about 40 more minutes. Do we have any more questions about this craziness I'm talking about? I know it's hard to follow if you're not a PHP guy, but I think that you guys are interested in how this back end interacts with these phones. Susan's got another question. I want somebody else besides Susan after Susan's done. Let's see if we can get another question. Go ahead, Susan.
I've heard that all my life that Susan, stop asking questions. Anyone but Susan have a question.
No, I love the fact.
Anyway,
that
but I'll hold off if anyone else has questions.
I haven't seen any.
Yeah,
so
it's more interactive, you know. Well, I'd like to go back to the Dreamweaver thing, but let's do that later. I think one thing I'd like to learn more about is
let's do the Dreamweaver thing. That's fine.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I am struggling with that. It's not editing a file that I have locally, but how do I use Dreamweaver when I'm making a plugin and I'm doing the index.php? I really haven't found a good way to edit that index.php file without using FileZilla and then pulling into Dreamweaver and then pushing it back on FileZilla.
Okay.
But I see you just going right to Dreamweaver and editing right from. But I guess you're working on a local file too, and then pushing the local file.
So check this out. So this is the Buzztouch server folder, and then this is my files folder, and this is the plugins folder. So if you had your own folder in here, you could edit any of these if you wanted. If you had your own folder in here, like yours is probably in here somewhere.
No, but mine's not local. Mine's only on my server only.
Right. So then, so you see up here I'm looking at the file manager in Dreamweaver.
Yeah.
I can go to remote view.
Oh, okay. All right. Oh, that's the trick. All right.
I'm not going to connect to that because I don't want you guys to see everything on my remote server. But the remote view, I'm just connecting to the server, and then I'm downloading. And then when I go to my local view, it's there.
Okay,
so
I
might have
download it from the
site. You might have skipped a step called the site manager. In Dreamweaver, you can set up a site, which is where you tell it your FTP information, and then you connect to your server.
No, I have that too. I just I just didn't understand about the remote view. I always had this little narrow file view thing. I didn't realize.
You can change the way that this looks, and I've got a different version that you probably look. But you can do, I can open this up into showing me the remote site and the local site side by side.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's what I need. Okay.
Right? So there's just these little controls up here to change the way that you look at that stuff.
Oh yeah, that's what I needed. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's just a matter of, downloading the file that you want to work on
Mhm.
and then editing it.
Yeah.
And like these are all plugins, right? I could go to this plugin, I could open up the index.php,
Mhm.
and I could edit it and then upload it.
Yeah, that's what I want to be able to do. That's what I kind of a much more cumbersome way of doing that. So
Well,
this is
you
much better.
you just learned something. So what was your other question?
Oh, I have a list of questions, but I think one thing I'd like to get from today would be a better understanding of how we should make plug the index.php file so it doesn't make problems when it gets uploaded into Buzztouch. And it is kind of interesting because there's kind of been a pattern of different things that happen when you upload a new plugin,
Uh-huh.
and then like it's really interesting that and I didn't, that the like the menu items disappeared on mine. And then there's been some more generic things, but I'm wondering what are the things that we should do on our plugins to make sure that when they get uploaded to Buzztouch, that we don't have, what are the pitfalls that we can avoid?
Some common ones that we're running into are, and they're mostly revolved around the fact that most people don't know how PHP works, and they don't know really what these blank plugins are kind of filled with. And so it's hard for them. Like, let me look at a plugin here, for example, menu with image. This is yours. So if I
Yeah.
open up this index page and I go down this and I say, okay, this is line 1, and this file is 1,400 lines long, right? Most
Mhm.
people are immediately like, what the heck? 1,400
Mhm.
files, that's crazy. And so they don't understand how this works. But if you kind of take your time and we've tried to comment and add spaces and do all these different things, really what you're saying is this identifies who's logged in. This is that logged in user object.
Mhm.
This here says the login is required. You can't get to this page unless you're logged into your control panel.
Mhm.
This here is going to increment the user's last page request. And remember, when you're looking at your control panel and you go to admin, you can manage your users and you can see that this person's last page request was right here.
Mhm.
So every one of your files will probably have this little routine. Hey, go update this guy's last page request. And we
Mhm.
set some properties for the control panel's path, because it depends on whether it's self-hosted or on buzztouch.com. We build a new web page, which is the thing that we're looking at when we go to your plugin in an app. I think I already have one added. Let's see, screens and actions. No, I guess I don't, but here's just a regular generic one. This is a web page, right? So
Mhm.
all of its metadata and all of its header information and all this stuff at the top, you don't want to have to write that over and over and over again. So we write it with a little method here called, the new page is a class. So we're saying, hey, go make a new web page and give it this name.
Mhm.
We get the GUI ID for the app out of the URL up here. We get the item ID for the screen we're looking at up here, because we've got to know what screen we're working on before we can change it.
Mhm.
Remember, we're working on one screen in the app. So we've got to know the app, we've got to know the screen, call that the item. We say, hey, if there's no screen and there's no app, this must be an invalid, bogus request. For example, if this app ID is blank, it'll tell me, let me find it here. See if I break this. Yeah, it's bogus. If I go back, get that loading. So we do some safety. We create a new application object. We give the title of the web page that we made up here, control panel web page. We set its page title to the name of the app plus control panel. So if you notice, it's the web page title, my first app control panel. That's the name
Mhm.
of the app. So when you look at your history, you can find that page. On and on and on. We get the Buzztouch item represents the screen we're working on. This is the ID of the plugin. This is the JSON variables for that plugin. The screen's nickname. We make sure that the person who's logged in should be able to manage this app, right? You wouldn't want somebody who doesn't own this app to be messing with it. We keep going. We have some variables for the sorting of the previous page, because the previous page, remember, is a list of screens. You might have this sorted down or up, right? So when we visit this screen and we go back, it should still remember what page we're on and how we're sorted. So we have to remember that. And I could go on and on and on. But the point is, most of this stuff is already written for you when you create a plugin using the tool. And the only thing that the plugin authors are changing is like the description here and some of the properties down here. And we covered that in the webinar where we were just pasting new properties in. And some little small things that you don't quite understand, I guess we'd need to be more specific on what it is that's confusing you. But yeah, some things tend to get screwed up, that's for sure. And we just do the best we can to check through. We have a whole checklist we go through, and it's getting more thorough as we go. Like Jim's menu list plugin was pretty quick. You know, it's not because he wrote it better or worse than you did. It's because we're getting better at looking for things that are sometimes screwy. And I can also say, in all truthfulness, right? There's a little bit of secret sauce into how we do this. And there's not everybody knows how we do it. And so there is some stuff that, you know, we just aren't going to tell people. Like there's certain things about our database that's set up that's just going to lead to confusion if we start explaining some of the, you know, they're not secrets. It's just it's more complicated than we're willing to try to get people to understand. And so when you upload a plugin to your self-hosted control panel, it's pretty easy to understand. But when you upload a plugin that's supposed to work on the self-hosted control panel and our site, it's pretty complicated what we got to do. So that there are some errors that we run into that are usually our fault, not yours.
But there are two different versions. And there's one like I noticed that there were some errors that didn't affect self-hosted, but then they did affect the Buzztouch Online. So there really is two different versions of the index.php file.
To answer your question, no. There's one version of the index.php page that will both run on our backend and your backend.
Oh, okay.
The difference is how you install it. You don't see what we do on our end to quote unquote install your plugin.
Oh, okay.
So you can see that on your server.
Yeah.
But the process that we go through and the checks that we have to go through to make sure it doesn't conflict with literally thousands of files and file names and variable names and all kinds of interesting things, it's just a different process, but the end result is the same. If I go to buzztouch.com right now and I go to my control panel and I go to my apps and I go to an application screen, I'm doing this on the screen right now so I can show you, and I go to a screen that I made using your plugin. Help me find it here. Menu with image. Is it on here? No, maybe I don't have it installed. You see it?
Top row, you have it.
Oh, there it is. So this path is the same thing. Files, plugins, menu with image. Files, plugins, you know, menu screen simple. Different plugin, but it's the same path. So the end result is the same. It lives in the same place on our server as it does your server, but getting it there is quite a bit more complicated.
But go back to your Buzztouch screen there for a second.
Okay.
The one that showed mine. I put a I'm trying to learn HTML and all these things, but I had put some HTML for a UL list under there. And so if you look at self-hosted, you'll see some bullets there, but the bullets didn't make it into the Buzztouch.
Ah, that's a great question.
So that's another.
That's a great question.
It's kind of a mystery, you know.
That's a great question, and again, we could noodle these out a lot. So your bulleted list would have been right here. You'd have explained how this worked, and you'd have had a bulleted list.
Yeah.
On our server on buzztouch.com, remember, we have style sheets and a theme that you don't necessarily know about, so I can tell you for sure I've set the style of our list to hidden.
Oh, sure, okay, that makes sense.
So you could override that, and that brings up a good point by saying something like this, you know, color, right? You can write inline style in your bulleted list if you wanted it to show up. But our CSS is overriding that, and that actually is one of the bullet points. How do we do custom themes? Like another example is you want to put a big header tag here, right? You might have put, you know, H1, my cool menu. Well, your H1 and your style sheet might be you know, font size 10.
Mm-hmm.
In my H1 on my style sheet might be font size 50. So it would look different depending on the environment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great question. Great question.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's missing, but yeah, because it was just a UL list. It was it was well unless you're not allowing the UL list, the bulleted list.
I guarantee if you look at the source, well, let's look at the source right here. Look, I'll show you. This is the Buzztouch.com control panel. I'm just going to view source. I'm going to find the LI tag. There's a bunch of them, right? So an icon or a small image which will display on the left side of the row. A title line in bold text. A description line which displays. This is probably the stuff you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what I put in there, yeah.
Right, but this list element in the style sheet that I'm using, that you don't control, is hidden.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
so you don't see the list. It's just like if I changed the font color to green, you wouldn't see that either, but it'd be green. If I said, hey, go to the list and make them all green. So there's some customizing that's going on there that you weren't aware of, and that's a great point. We should probably document that somewhere.
So it's like the CSS, but when it goes in self-hosted, well, other people in my self-hosting I can see it, but and other people in their self-hosting, can they see the bullets? Because the bullets actually
depends on what they've done to their style sheet.
Oh, maybe they can, maybe they can't. Okay.
So you could have just as easily gone like this, and this is just advanced stuff, right? Let's say you have a bulleted list item 1, list item 2, and let's say you want to make sure that those are going to show, right? You could make a new style, my list item. You could have done the color, the padding, right? Whatever style rules you want to apply. This is CSS. That's called a class, and you could apply your class to your list items, and then no matter what their style sheet says, you're going to be overwriting those.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
And that's called inline right in the document. Most of the time, you wouldn't want to put it right there, right above the elements. You would want to put it near the top so that people could find it. You know, in most cases, it'll be in the head section of the document, but you're doing it inline because the head's already made for you. But yeah, that's a great question, and that's just an example of something that I never even considered to even talk about, is the fact that you're not controlling the person's control panel in the way that it's laid out entirely, right? Like this might be green. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it'd be nice to actually. Well, I was thinking that it would be kind of nice to have like I don't know if I'll get there with plugins. But one idea to make plugins is to actually really improve the clarity of what the instructions are.
Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree.
Add more CSS and just add more HTML to make it a little more interesting. Add more.
I think the trick there is this developers list over here on the right. You see the YouTube button? This just takes us to whoever the author is, and it happens to be me in this case. In your plugin's configuration file, right here, you see where it says YouTube URL? I wouldn't put that to a generic YouTube channel. I would put that to a specific movie for this plugin.
Oh, good idea.
And then I would put a big graphic up here, a big arrow pointing at this, says, watch the movie.
Oh, yeah, you could change that. I didn't realize that.
Exactly.
That auto feeds. Oh, that's a good idea.
So, but you're right. You know, we're one of our weakest points, which everybody everybody that knows me and knows me well knows that I literally went back to college and got a degree about this, and a design degree. I haven't exercised a lot of way to learn because I still just don't have any confidence in this. One of our weakest points is design. We're not designers, right? I'm a nerd, so there's small text, little buttons. It's very, utilitarian. It's clearly like a database guy who's behind all this stuff. So those kinds of enhancements on your plugins. And if you remember, if you go to like Danny's plugins and the control panel, I mean, some of this stuff is just gorgeous, right? He makes these amazing screenshots, and he makes these cool PDFs. You know, that's a skill that you absolutely, if you're good at it, go for it. Make your landing page on your plugin sweet looking, and people will appreciate it. So let's move on to the last topic before we run out of time, and that is customizing custom themes. So if you look at this is only applicable to self-hosted because we don't let you do that on your on your Buzztouch.com's panel. But if we go to Buzztouch server again, oh, I'm secure here. Let me get rid of that. And we go to admin, settings, and when we look at directories and file locations, you see where it says theme directory path? That's pointing to the theme that our application, that our self-hosted software is using. So it is files theme. So files theme, and there's just a bunch of files in there, right? We've got the style sheet, we've got the favorite icon. That favorite icon is the favorite icon that you should be seeing up here. Maybe it's missing. Oh no, it's the favorite icon on the tab right here. Different browsers show it in different places. I think Firefox shows it next to the address. Chrome is showing it up on the top left. But this is the theme that we're using, and it's got orange bands. It's got this logo. It's black in the background. If we wanted to make a different theme, all we would have to do is copy the theme folder. I'm pasting it still in the files directory because I don't want to overwrite it when we do a new update. I'll call this I don't know, pink theme. Actually, it's Halloween, so orange, we're already orange. Let's do blue theme. Right? And so everything inside of this folder, I just copied it. It's the same stuff, but now I have new versions of it. So instead of using this theme, I'm going to use the blue theme. So I've got to upload it to my server, of course, because I just did that locally. I just made those on my computer. Now I'm uploading this directory, and it's three files: style, fave icon, and logo. So we call that blue theme. Let me make sure that I got the typing right. Yeah, so blue theme, and I'm going to say save. And right now, the theme is exactly the same. I just hit refresh. The theme is the same because we haven't changed it. It's just a copy. But if I open up this style sheet, I can manipulate and change this style sheet, or change this logo, or change this favorite icon without screwing up the other theme. So for example, if I didn't want the background to be black and I wanted the background to be blue, I could change the background color of the body. All this black background in the body is going to turn to blue because I'm changing the style sheet. I'm not a designer. I would call that ugly, but nonetheless, I could do it. And there's not a lot of places where the colors are, so you could search for the existing orange occurrences and change them. Most of the color styles, let me go to background blue. Go to background. I'm going to put this back to black. Most of the color styles are this CSS class called color light background and color dark background. So this color dark background represents this gray right here that you see everywhere, the application list, the little tool panel on the left. And then this orange that you see is this color band. So this color band, we could make the background color, I'll make it purple, or we could put, it's a CSS file, right? We could put a gradient or an image or whatever we wanted. And we can change the properties of this, not just the colors, we can change anything we want and customize this control panel. So most people ask me when I get the emails, why do I want to customize the control panel? I'm happy with the way it looks. And they don't realize that the whole cool factor with this control panel, in my opinion, is if you're doing business-to-business app development and you're satisfying clients, you can deliver a control panel with your app. And you can brand the control panel for your client. And you can take the extra steps for them, set them up a domain name, install it on a web server, charge them good money to provide a good service, and you can now build applications for your clients. Each application has its own control panel. Since it's open source, you could remove the create new button, create new users. You can get rid of all this stuff if you really, really wanted. And so I understand that most people aren't skilled enough in all of the different technologies, but I do believe that if we keep preaching it and kind of understanding it together, down the road, maybe we'll have themes to share and we'll have cool control panels and all that kind of stuff. But So it's 7:15. I don't have any more topics. I want to just wrap up with something that I say all the time in our office, which is all the control panel does. Oh, you know what? We have some time. Let's talk about the database. All the control panel does is allow you to manipulate the values in your database that then are saved to create the configuration data. You don't even need this control panel. You don't even need it if you understand how to manipulate this JSON data on your own. If you can type this stuff on your own and you understand how it all works, you don't need this fancy control panel. All it does is manipulate data in the database. And then it's that database that stores all your properties so that when you ask for them, you get them. It's a simple database. Looks like we have a question, which is good. Oh, Warren's typing any questions. Okay. A few more minutes about the database, and then we'll just kind of try to wrap this up. There's 10 tables in this database. It's super, super simple. Got a list of API keys. Remember, you could maybe create more. Every one of your apps has an API key. Your application requests. This is what keeps track of how many times your devices connect. Application users. Applications themselves. Got a configuration table. Links and files and items and plugins and users. That's it. So every time you create an application, you're going to get a new record, and these are the fields for that table. And this control panel allows you to manipulate this database. That's really all there is to it. So of course it's sophisticated in terms of how it does it, but its whole purpose is to allow you to enter values into your database that are saved so that when your phone connects, it's lightning fast and persistent and all that kind of stuff. For screen by screen, for app by app, user by user, however you want to do it. There's not any limit to the flexibility. It's just a matter of, how far you want to take this stuff. So the Buzztouch.com control panel fundamentally works the same way. It's quite a bit more sophisticated. There's a tremendous amount of rows in each one of these tables. The Buzztouch.com control panel and website itself has about 50 or 60 tables spread across many databases and many machines. It's quite a bit more sophisticated just because of the volume. But it's the same idea. PHP connects to the database, asks the database a question such as, what are all the questions for this quiz? The database returns those BT items. PHP outputs them to the screen. Off we go. So I don't know how else to explain it to a technical group like you guys any better, right? My mind doesn't work the same way as everybody else's mind, so I'm sure there's, we could talk about every one of these topics in great length, but overall, the control panel is a PHP application, otherwise known as a web application, that's organized by directories. You upload it to your server. You interact with it with your browser. It stores all your interactions in the database. Your phone connects to the API script in your software right here. And that API's got a couple different routines. Some people have built sophisticated routines. Some people use the standard ones. And off it goes. The phone gets the data it wants. You guys get the control over the database you need. And everybody's happy. So I think if we don't have any more questions, we'll just wrap this up a little bit early. I got 10 minutes to go. Warren, what do you think?
I think that would be. Hang on, am I muted? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I feel like because there aren't questions, I think I'm a little bit more technical than I'd hoped to be, but I don't know how else to do. I don't know how else to explain it. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, and actually, when you suggested this topic, it was hot off of the plugin video that you did, where you showed when people were building a plugin, you went over the control panel and you said, well, here's how you can add a field, and you add this in your control panel and fill in the blank and watch it do this in the plugin.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, what we were doing is in that custom plugin, You're bringing up a great point here, and maybe we just kind of maybe the title misled me a little bit. But when we look at the screens, we were building our user agreement plugin.
That's correct.
And we added these little boxes here, and we connected those little boxes to our database with a couple of copy and pastes. And so maybe that's what we could have done. Maybe, and let's find that plugin, files. Plugins, license agreement, license agreement, index, and I know this is the file because I followed the path in my browser's address bar. We were copying and pasting these sections of code right here, like the license agreement settings. We entered this, we pasted that in. And then when we hit refresh, we got it here and wired it up to the save button and all that kind of stuff. So that is how it works, though, right? So when you hit save, how does the control panel work? What it's doing is it's saving these values to the database so that when you when your device asks for this information, it can be produced. And it's produced by your own control panel's API. Right here. I'm on buzztouch.com right now, Buzztouch server, but that's fundamentally how it works. Is it stores all your settings in a database. Your phone asks for a PHP script. That PHP script goes to the database and asks for information and spits it out. So I realize it's technical. We've been hearing lately that we might be, as an organization, and this is open for conversation to everybody who's listening. I'd love to hear. And I don't know if you can open up the mic, Warren. I'm not sure how that works. But
I'll go ahead and unmute everybody just so they can contribute here.
Yeah, awesome. So jump in, guys, if you want. We've been told by more than one person that because of the sophistication of this software, we might be better off not having it open source, charging money for it, charging people to support it, and charging people to customize it. And that very well may be the case. And the challenge that we have is, I've always said from the beginning that I want to spend my time during the day with you guys, people who I believe are interested in understanding how this works, and not with, I don't want to do programming for clients. That's just not my desire. And so it might be that I'm trying to get people to understand things that they just aren't ever going to want to understand. That could be part of why we might not be growing faster and all those kinds of things. I don't know, because it's complicated stuff, that's for sure. But if we sealed it up in a little black box and sold it to you and didn't let you see it, thousands of questions you don't even get them, because nobody's trying to figure out lots of code.
That's what this is also cool, because we actually can try to learn all this stuff, and it's just so much fun. I can hardly stand it.
Well, you're the minority. Right, most people don't care, Susan. I hate to say it. You and I can nerd out together, but very few of us want to be super nerds. I agree.
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that, but I know it's going to be a subset of probably Buzztouch users. But think about Sherry and Jim and everything we talked about when you were here. It's just so much fun.
No, that's a good point. It's too late now. I can't go back. I mean, there's a lot of people using this stuff, and I'm certainly not going to close it up or whatever. But there's a certain amount of logic behind that statement that, because you're giving it to everyone and letting them basically play with it and screw it up, you're also introducing lots of problems and questions and things that you wouldn't even know about if you couldn't change it. Let's just say that. Yeah. So it's fine. It's interesting. I love going through this stuff, and I love learning from you guys and trying to extend it and trying to make it do more stuff. And I've been saying this at the end of every webinar, and I'm going to say it again in these last couple of minutes. We're trying to create credibility for ourselves in this, quote, app building world, right? We used to be the people who did this. I'd like to think that we invented it. And now there's dozens and dozens of, quote unquote, app maker sites that, in my opinion, aren't taking the right approach in terms of helping developers. And we're lumped into that crowd, and that crowd of sites, frankly, don't have a whole lot of credibility because of the way they operate. I want to be credible, and I want our organization to be known as the place that professional developers respect and go to because it's open and because you can do whatever you want with it. Not because it's, you know, make an app in 5 minutes and put it in the Google Play and try to spam people. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, so I'm going to ask you guys once again to try to stick with me on that and help me spread the message that this is professional software for professional people that happens to be being used by people who aren't programmers yet, because we've opened it up to them. And that's kind of our goal, is we want both professionals and aspiring folks to be able to benefit from this, without giving us a pile of money. And that's kind of what we're doing.
Well, let me just jump in here and say,
yeah,
kind of about my experience, David, and
sure.
I think you know this. I'm not a programmer. I'm not a programmer. Don't have the time available to be a programmer, But when I discovered this site, I was able to build something really cool, from my perspective, really cool,
sure,
by using a lot of common sense, looking at the tool that you provided for us, and following the help information that was on the website. And I got there pretty quickly, and I got basically exactly what I wanted, and built a couple more apps. Everything was cool. And as long as I stay on the path that's laid out for me, I can build applications. Now, as soon as I want to step off the path and do something that is, not provided in a plugin, for example, I've got to fill in that big gap.
Exactly.
And so for me, I've got to stay on the path or figure out how to fill the gap.
Yeah.
By learning PHP and, learning all these other things that I personally don't have the time to do that.
Sure. Yeah, and you're not alone. Absolutely. So that's a problem that we have to try to figure out how to solve. And that's the reason that, what the heck was that? That's the reason that this classification of now online app builders, quote unquote, are now losing credibility in the marketplace because of what you just said. You're exactly right. If all you can do is a set number of things, you're never going to be able to create Angry Birds. And so getting from the set number of things to Angry Birds is a giant gap. So what I'm trying to do, and what I've been trying to do, is fill the distance between those two things, fill that gap with, community relationships, people helping each other, kind of cross that. And if you can assemble most of your app except for the actual screen where you drag the bird, I think you're better off trying to then finish just that one screen that you couldn't use the tool to do by making a custom plugin or getting help making a custom plugin. But we all can't deny that you're exactly right. To make that amazing thing, there is either skill required or a relationship required with somebody who knows how to do it. And that is going to be the challenge, I think, forever.
Well, that's what we're trying to do with these things, right? With these webinars and all the other training that's out there and building this community.
Oh, yeah. So speaking of, I want to show you guys something else. I've been working on this. It's not quite done. And I want to get your perspective, all you guys. I'm changing the meetup screen. And what I want to do is put a calendar on the screen like this. Can you see my screen?
Oh, nice.
Yes.
So this is just a fake number, 1, 2, 3 in the center of the grid. But what I thought I would do is put a big number like this 10 here. This is the 10th, so I got a 10. This is the 11th. What I thought I would do is put a big number there or a check mark or something that there's an event that day, and then clicking on it would bring you to the details of everything happening that day, everything being the meetup or the webinar or whatever. And then if there's a video from a past webinar, then we could just find it and watch it from a calendar. That was kind of my goal here. So then there'll just be a few of us who will be, quote unquote, allowed to add things to the meetup's calendar. So you think that's a good idea, or do you think we should stick with that kind of generic list? I kind of need a calendar. I'm getting to the point now where I myself need to know what's coming up.
David's Kristen, yeah.
That's a perfect idea. This is Sherry. Happy Halloween.
Hi, Sherry.
Hi. I've been dodging back and forth with the trick-or-treaters and just turned off the lights.
Got it.
I just wanted to say that, you know, with the Women's of Buzztouch kind of conflict with Warren's. So
Right.
this, to me, is invaluable because I don't want you to get to that point of burnout. So I would prefer the calendar because I'm more of a visual person myself, too.
Yeah, totally. Totally. So I thought what we would do is we would take these logos and some of these groups that are forming, and we would put them maybe, you know, maybe down the side of our calendar or something, and just kind of give them a shout out, or maybe along the, you know, along the left here, something like that. And then when you clicked on one of these, if it was associated with one of those groups, the UK group or the women group or the Minnesota group or whatever groups are in the future, you know, it'd just be kind of obvious. That way we could, when Warren was done doing it, we could put the video there. When we can, maybe we can put the registration link there, you know, stuff like that instead of using that forum. We could keep the forum, but I think this would be easier.
David, with the list of the previous videos.
Yeah, totally. Totally. The previous video would be big.
Yeah, I would personally like to see that in a list view. You know, basically saying video on this, and here's the link.
Just all this past stuff that we did, like in just a list of dates.
Yeah, one page where you can have a look at any video that's ever been done by anyone that's submitted to you that you've approved.
And can I assume that I'm listening to Kristen?
You think is valuable, like these webinars. So we could have the list of, you know, I mean, you can do it whatever.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
we have one more minute to go, and I wanted to bring this up.
Yeah.
Thomas from the UK is not here. In the UK meetup, I asked those guys who offered to help me restructure this concept of Buzztouch U. I'm going to ask you guys to do the same thing. The problem with Buzztouch U right now is there's two problems in my mind. It is, first off, the videos are way too long, time-wise. They take too long. So I'm going to try to list, and I got a little of this from Warren too. I'm going to try to list literally hundreds of things that are like 5 and 6 minutes long each, and make quick little videos, and I can make, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these a day, and just try to narrow it down, like Kristen just said, with a topic and a video, and that's it. We're losing lots of people on these long videos that are just boring. So if you guys could help somehow organize a list of what these paths should include, you know, what does the iOS path learn to do? I mean, I could open up a, you know, I've started writing books about this stuff. I could open up my notes and just put down what I think it should include, but I'm trying to include you guys so I don't, you know, miss stuff. What should the Android path include? What should the plugins path include? And just
maybe we should start a thread about that, David.
Huh?
Maybe we should start a forum thread about topics that should be included in that.
That's a good idea, but I think we would end up with just a jillion posts instead of like an organized document.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody should start a spreadsheet or something that says, you know, what should be included and where in the order should it go. You know what I mean?
I like it the way it is. I thought it was really good. I mean, it didn't take very long to get through it. Every time a new one came out, I had to kind of drop everything for several hours and get through it. I wanted to get to the star, so I like the star. I think it's really good the way it is. I mean,
well, and that's cool, but you're the minority, right? And so just to give you an example, this video right here, the core concept video, which is that animation, gets watched by about 80% of the people who register.
Mm-hmm.
This video here, the 5th video in this very first learning path, gets watched by about 16% of the people who register. This video, the first one in iOS, 9%.
Oh.
The further down the list you go, nobody watches them. And I don't know if it's because...
But I think we're screening out people who probably shouldn't be on Buzztouch anyway.
Well, it's either that or what Kristen said, they don't even know where to find them because they're not just an easy list, right? I had to click 3 times to get